Mary, get in the boat, quickly, now. You turn to the lifeboat, creaking ominously over icy, pitch-black water. In the boat are 10 other women, their pale faces reflecting the same terror you're sure is pasted across your own. Your daughter clings to you, her little face buried in your neck. She's too afraid to cry. How could this be happening? Around you is pure chaos. Fear thickens the air like smog, curling around and choking your lungs. Under your feet, the floor is starting to slant so sharply you're having a hard time keeping your balance. Horrified voices ring out across the deck, punctured by yells and screams. Beneath it all, the low sound of string instruments thrum beneath the pandemonium. Wildly, your brain starts to pick up the lyrics to the familiar tune. Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Mary! Your husband frantically grabs your shoulders, forcing you to look at him. Your eyes meet his, stricken. You need to take Aaron and go, now. Get in the boat, get to safety. Thomas, I can't, Mary, go. Thomas, I won't leave you. I'm Christiana.
And I'm Bree.
Settle in and put on your life jackets.
Because you're about to hear something strange.
Welcome to episode 17, Sinkable, part 2.
Well, that was intense.
I'm also going to say in my world, Mary, Thomas, and Aaron, they live.
Oh, that's good.
I decided that when I was writing this 10 seconds ago. Hello, friends. We're back with Sinkable, part 2, a.k.a. Christiana is now a Titanic historian.
Sometimes the universe just, thrusts things upon you, whether you hate the movie or not.
It thrust this upon me. And I'm not that terribly upset about it, even though it's a really sad topic, because I am fascinated.
For the record, I'm not the one who hates the movie. It's too long for my brain.
I'm the one that hates the movie. I'll say it.
It's too long for my brain.
Yeah, it is
the problem.
So long. All right. So I want to go quickly kind of how I'm going to do this episode. You might recall from last time I was giving out little puzzle pieces and then kind of tying them together later in parts of the narrative. I'm going to be doing that again, so bear with me. Everything is going to tie together eventually. It might just sound strange how I'm piecing it. I also want to put a trigger warning right here at the beginning of the episode. This is a really rough one. There will be in-depth discussion of a sinking ship, as well as death by drowning and hypothermia. We'll also be discussing a suicide in the aftermath of the sinking, and one potentially during it, but there's not really founded evidence for it, but anyway, we'll get there. Either way, if this is not your jam, please do what is best for your mental health. If you would like to listen to part of the episode just to get a little more of the background without listening to the events of the sinking itself, I'd suggest listening up to around the time when Frederick Fleet calls out the first iceberg warning and then skipping ahead to where we're discussing the aftermath. Because like I said, there's just no other way around this. This is not a fun episode. This is not nice.
We can put those timestamps in the episode description.
Yeah. Please take care of yourself, guys. We want you to have fun with us, not be traumatized. So, quick little recap from part 1. Titanic launched on her first and only voyage on April 10th, 1912, with over 2,000 souls aboard. Many immigrants were aboard the ship, as well as holiday goers. While the Titanic was meant to be a quick ship, it was still slower than it could have been due to changes to the propellers that would make for a smoother ride. We talked about this a lot last time. Luxury abounded. There were massive emphasis was placed on the passage being luxurious as well as quick. And while class differences were definitely prevalent on this ship, Titanic was still a much more luxurious passage for third class or quote-unquote steerage passengers than they could find on other ships. So I want to start the episode by talking about some of the passengers that were aboard this ship and giving a little bit of background on them, because we will, again, tie everything into a little bit of a bow later. There were 324 first-class passengers, 284 second-class, and 709 third-class passengers. Of these, there were 107 children aboard, mostly from the third class. There were also four-footed passengers on the Titanic. There were 12 dogs aboard. Kennels were located at the base of the fourth funnel, so that, I don't want to say the fake funnel because it did serve a purpose, but the one that didn't service the boilers. And the price for passage for a dog was as expensive as that of a child.
Can I say, at least a couple of years ago at the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge, there was a whole thing about the dog, and I had to go through it very quickly because it was making me sad.
Yeah, I'm actually I was just about to say I won't be putting any more about the dogs in because I just can't handle it. The first person I want to talk about is Captain Edward John Smith. He was born January 27th of 1850. And he started his seafaring career at age 17 and started with White Star Line in 1880. He received several medals while in service before becoming the Titanic's captain. When the Olympic launched, we talked about this a little bit last time, Captain Smith was her first commander, and he experienced his first blunder of his entire life while being in command of a ship. He was an excellent seaman and had not had any issues up until this time. And in May of 1907, he was quoted as saying, I, quote, have never seen a wreck and have never wrecked, nor was I ever in any predicament that threatened to end in disaster of any sort.
Wow.
Yeah. And we'll see what happens with Captain Smith.
That is like, okay, so, you know, like in the horse world, there are things you don't talk about because you don't want to jinx yourself.
Yes.
I'd imagine seafaring people, like,
yeah,
like sailors and all of that are even more superstitious, I would say, than horseback riders.
Yeah. Yeah. He really should not have said that. So he became the commander of the Titanic on April 1st, 1912, and he oversaw her sea trials. And he brought with him Chief Officer Henry Wilde from the Olympic, because they both had served on the Olympic. And that caused a little bit of contention of the remaining Titanic crew. There were other officers that were supposed to be crewed on the Titanic who wanted to take that position that Henry Wilde took, but they were demoted. And that caused one of the crewmen to actually leave altogether, which is kind of a weird, like,
you know?
Oh, man.
That, like, probably saved that person's life.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. So the last thing I'm going to say about him is that he was married to Sarah Eleanor Pennington, and they had one daughter, Helen Melville Smith. The next person I want to talk about is Charles Herbert Lightoller. I'm going to throw out here, I want to do a whole episode about this guy because he is cool. I want to meet him. I won't, obviously, but if I could, I would. He was born March 30th, 1874. He was the second officer aboard the Titanic, and his seafaring career began when he was just 13 years old. So he was really young. And he went through it at sea. He went through bad storms, civil unrest, illness epidemics, and also needed to be rescued at one point on a ship that ran aground.
Was he in charge of that ship?
No. Okay. He was in the crew, but
okay.
He wasn't a captain.
Like, I'm not saying, like, I'm sure you could do everything right and still end up running aground.
Oh, sure. But yeah, no, as far as I'm aware, I don't know that I don't remember if he was a captain. I cut a lot of information out because I had a lot in here about him. He's a fascinating figure.
More on him to come later.
Oh, yes, definitely. At one point in his lifetime, on the high sea, if you will, Lightoller actually contracted malaria after sailing across the coast of West Africa, and he had to take several years off from being at sea to recover. The illness nearly killed him. He joined White Star Line in 1900 with the ship the Medic. And when Titanic went for her sea trials, Lightoller actually was serving as first officer, but was demoted to second officer, as was touched above. This is my personal opinion. After reading more about him and doing some more research about him, I think he got the short end of the stick there. I think he should have been first officer.
He got gypped?
I think he did, yeah. Not to say anything about Henry Wilde. I'm not trying to, start wars here, but Lightoller is cool. I'm a fangirl. Anyway, another very, very famous passenger that many people probably know about is Margaret Brown, also known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, another person I want to do an episode about because she is incredible. I want to note here that she was not actually known as Molly in her lifetime. That was post-mortem, where she got that, or I guess I should say posthumously, she got that nickname, so I'm going to call her Margaret.
It's interesting because I've never heard a Margaret called Molly. But
I know.
my Nana's name was Margaret, and everyone called her Nan. Like, before she was a grandmother. Like, Nan was short for Margaret.
Huh.
Somehow.
Interesting. So she was born July 18th in 1867 to Irish immigrants. And she lived a very, very interesting life. She became involved heavily in philanthropical work and in women's rights. She married James Joseph Brown, who was a mining engineer, in 1886, and the couple had 2 children together. The couple ended up separating after being married for 23 years. They never officially divorced, but they did remain separated until James passed away in 1922. Margaret ended up on this ship because she was on a trip. She ended up on the Titanic because she was on a trip to France when she received news that one of her grandchildren was ill. She wanted to return home to him, and she booked her passage on the Titanic maiden voyage to do so. So, because I was a little confused, I was like, wait, if she was born in America, what was she doing in France? So that's how she got over there. That's how she got on the Titanic. Next person, Thomas Anderson. I'm not going to go too deep into him because we talked about him a lot in the last episode. To recap, he was one of the people that designed Titanic and was one of the higher-ups, I guess you will. Frederick Fleet.
What an awesome name for someone on a ship.
Right? He was the lookout on the Titanic who called out the warning that there was an iceberg in Titanic's path. He was born October 15th, 1887. And he was raised in foster families throughout his childhood, beginning his sea career in 1903. 2 more very important people I'm putting them in the same category here, were Harold Bride and John Jack Phillips. These 2 men were the wireless operators on the ship, and they played a crucial role, particularly in the time after the Titanic hit the iceberg. Their primary position on the ship before hitting the iceberg was to send and receive messages for passengers during the voyage. I believe we talked about that a little bit last time. And I have another group of people here that I want to go down through their names. They were the ship's orchestra. Their names were Wallace Hartley, who was the violinist and bandmaster, John Law Hume, the violinist. It's spelled with an S at the end, so I'm not exactly sure on pronunciation, forgive me, but I believe it's Georges Alexandre Kieran's violinist, Theodore Ronald Brayley, the pianist, John Frederick Preston Clark, the bassist, Percy Cornelius Taylor, the cellist, Roger Marie Barreau, the cellist, John Wesley Woodward, cellist. The orchestra on the ship was divided into a quintet and a trio. The quintet consisted of Wallace, John Frederick Preston Clark, John Law Hume, John Wesley Woodward, and Percy.
Half of these people's names were John.
Are John. That's why I was like, why didn't I write all their last names out? Oh, that's why. The trio was Roger Theodore and Georges. The quintet was led by Wallace, and they often played at tea time, church services, and after-dinner concerts. The trio played in the a la carte restaurant and Café Parisien. Sorry, I know that was a long one, but those men in particular are very important to me, so I wanted to name them. John Jacob Astor IV was the richest man aboard the ship. He built the Astoria Hotel in New York in 1897 next to the Waldorf Hotel, which had been built by his cousin. This eventually became the Waldorf Astoria. He was aboard the ship with his second wife, 18-year-old Madeline Force, and she was a year younger than his son. The pair ended up traveling abroad to escape the gossip that was surrounding their marriage because she was so young, and when they eventually decided to return to America, they did so on the Titanic. So they're another one, like Molly Brown. They were abroad for reasons. Isidore Strauss and his wife, Ida Strauss. Isidore was the owner of Macy's department store, and they were on holiday in the Riviera and decided to book a last-minute trip back to America on the Titanic. And they were traveling with Isidore's manservant, John Farthing, and Ida's maid, Ellen Bird.
Manservants.
Manservant. I love that. So I've got 3 more people here I want to go over. Jeremiah Burke and his cousin Hannah Hegarty. They were both third-class passengers emigrating to New York. And the last little girl I want to talk about is Milvania Dean. She was 2 months old. Her family was emigrating to the U.S., but the passage they were originally supposed to be on was canceled due to the coal strike that we talked about in part 1. They ended up as third-class passengers on the Titanic, and she was the youngest survivor. I'm going to move on to the beginning of the end here. Sunday, April 14th would begin Titanic's final day at sea. The day began with church services at 10:30 in the morning. Captain Smith presided over these services for first-class passengers, while the second-class services were led by Assistant Purser Reginald Barker. Catholic priests led Mass in second class. In the third class, there was no official crew-led service, but third-class passengers may have attended Catholic Mass in second class. There was also supposed to be a lifeboat drill scheduled for the crew and passengers. However, this drill was canceled. It's commonly believed that this drill was canceled due to the captain not wanting to disrupt the ship's Sunday services. The ship steward, George Crowe, stated this in his testimony during the U.S. inquiry into the Titanic sinking. However, there does seem to be some evidence that this may not be true. One article I read showed evidence that the drill was canceled because of a strong wind that had picked up on the morning the drill was scheduled, which would have caused too much risk to perform the lifeboat drills because they would have been swinging the boats around.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how to feel about this. In my mind, it's perform the drill, but modify it to make it safer, which I don't know if that would have been helpful or not.
I wonder if it could have at least been like practicing evacuation routes to get to the lifeboats.
Yes, and I think that especially would be helpful because, I mean, the ship was a maze. It was so big. It was so hard to figure out where you were, especially when you were down in those lower decks, you know. So a lifeboat drill had been conducted in the port before Titanic's maiden voyage. This drill tested the strength of the davits, which are like the crane-like structures that lower the lifeboats into the water. They were tested and found sound. 16 lifeboats were lowered into the water during this drill, but the collapsible boats weren't launched at all. And all this being said, it seems that the drills that did take place in port really weren't enough to truly prepare the crew for an actual emergency situation. There was nothing in my research that said that specifically, but that was kind of me reading between the lines. And there was also more evidence, deeper evidence that went into why that lifeboat drill was canceled. It sounds like church services or religious services could have been part of it, but I don't believe that's the whole reason. I couldn't get too far into the weeds because it was making my head hurt trying to get it figured out. So I'll get back to you on that if you're interested. So during the day of the 14th, Titanic also received 5 separate ice warnings. At least some of these messages were passed on to the bridge and to Captain Smith. In response to these warnings, around 5:50 p.m., Captain Smith did alter the course of Titanic slightly south. He did continue his speed of 22 knots, which she had been maintaining.
How did they get the warnings? Like, where did they come from?
So that's where Phillips and Harold Bride come in. They were receiving... So a lot of what they did on the ship was to pass on passenger messages, but they were also getting messages from, I believe it was Norway, where they were close to, as well as other ships, because they could communicate through these wireless... Right. So if other ships were seeing ice, they were yelling over to Titanic and going, hey, be careful, we're seeing this, this, and this.
So it's almost like the hand radios that trucks have?
Yeah. Yeah, in a way.
We used to have those when we camped.
Nice.
Everyone had code names. It was great.
I love it.
Anyways, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's a good question. As the evening drew on, things started to go sideways. Wireless operator Jack Phillips was working in the Marconi wireless room, relaying messages from passengers to Cape Race, Newfoundland. There we go.
There we go.
My answer.
I would have kept reading.
No, you're fine. And these would have been relayed from there to family and friends. At 9:40 p.m., a warning from another ship, the Mesaba, I believe is how it's pronounced, it could be Mesaba, stating that there was, quote, heavy ice pack and a great number of large icebergs. And I want to talk about icebergs here because I need a palate cleanser before we go any further. Icebergs, per Wikipedia, are large masses of ice that have broken off a glacier or ice field and they float freely in the water. They vary in size and shape and are serious maritime hazards. Normally only about 1/10 of an iceberg can actually be seen above the water. The rest is beneath it. There are iceberg size classifications according to the International Ice Patrol that I had to put in here because I was cackling at them.
These names. This is celebrity. It's like, you know, when you get sushi.
Yes.
And like there's the ginger in between to, like, cleanse
Yes.
This is the ginger.
This is the ginger. It absolutely is. So there is a growler, which is less than a meter high and less than 5 meters long. Oh, I want to know who named these.
It's us from the past.
You're right. There is a Bergie bit, which is 1 to 5 meters high and 5 to 15 meters long.
What's that in American measurements?
Oh, God, I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure. So small is 5 to 15 meters high, 15 to 60 meters long. Medium is 15 to 45 meters high, 60 to 122 meters long. Large, 45 to 75 high, 122 to 213 long. Very large. Over 75 high, over 213 meters long.
Like, that one. That one is so large. It is a very large.
It's very large.
Do you think the people were drunk when they made this?
I have no
Because, like, okay, I don't know whoever made this classification system, but, like, a growler, you can get those of alcohol. They're like, so, like, oh, look, that's a growler.
I did.
And then, like, what about that one? That one's large, but that one. That one
is very
very large.
What about that one? That's medium.
And that one is a Bergie bit.
Honestly, I love
it. It's not. I mean, it's this part is funny. The rest of the context
it's
is
not. That's why I had to put it in there, because I was like, that's hilarious.
Okay, we're gonna get rid of football fields because we're equestrians. How many standard dressage rings is that?
Oh man, that's got a very large. I feel is like 100.
100 dressage rings, or
yeah. I don't know.
That's a lot of dressage rings.
It's a lot of dressage rings.
How many circles can you do in that?
People listening are like, what's wrong with them? Horseback riders, what's wrong with us? Oh, man. So after that little bit of levity, I'm going to go back to the ice warnings here that we were getting. The warnings from the Mesaba never got past to Captain Smith, apparently due to the large number of messages that Jack Phillips was trying to transmit from passengers. It sounds like he was just, like, completely overwhelmed.
Oh, no.
At 10:55 p.m., another ice warning came through, this time from the nearby ship, the Californian. If you're familiar with the Titanic, that might sound familiar to you. The Californian let the Titanic know that their ship, like the Californian, was completely trapped and surrounded by ice. They were stuck. Or, well, I shouldn't say they were trapped. They were stopped because they were surrounded by ice.
It was like a roadblock.
I think so. I got the gist that it was like they didn't feel safe continuing forward, so they just stopped where they were for a minute. I don't think it was like they were completely like stuck in ice, but they were surrounded by it.
They chose not to be stuck in ice.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Apparently, this message angered Jack Phillips because he radioed back, shut up, I am busy, I am working Cape Race.
Oh, okay, so he's having a bad day.
He was having a rough one, which, like, okay, maybe don't take that so lightly, but also, when you're really overwhelmed, I can't imagine.
Well, he like greatly exited his window of tolerance.
Yes, yeah, he was out of it. One of my resources stated that one of the messages was not relayed to the captain because Jack didn't realize the Titanic was as close as they were to where that warning came from, the heavy ice warning. And I can't help wondering if these reactions were brought on not only by the overwhelm that Jack was feeling at the time from trying to get all these passenger messages transmitted, but also because he knew the Titanic had already changed course and he trusted the captain to keep everyone out of danger. Like, I mean, Captain Smith has had this prestigious career up to this point. You know, he's like, my captain knows what he's doing. Everyone shut up and leave me alone. I've got these passengers all over me. I can't breathe. Go away.
Yeah.
Outside the Marconi wireless room, First Officer William Murdoch relieved Second Officer Lightoller, my guy, from his watch at 10 p.m.
Why do I know the name Murdoch? Daredevil.
Oh.
Sorry, isn't it? Isn't that?
I do not know, actually. At this time, the two lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, had climbed to the crow's nest to begin their shift.
Yeah, but it's Matt Murdoch, but it's spelled differently.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. It's also noted here that their binoculars had been misplaced, making it harder to see at any distance.
Oh, no.
Yes. Adding to this difficulty was that it was a very clear, calm night at this point. The wind had died down from earlier, because remember we were talking about earlier, it was pretty windy.
Mm-hmm.
And survivors of the tragedy stated that the sea was, quote, like glass. Like glass. One may think, wouldn't that make visibility better? In this case, not necessarily. So the stars were out in full, but there was no moon the night the Titanic sank. The sea being calm also added a strange layer to the lack of visibility, because if there had been waves, the white breakwater against the side of any possible hazards, like an iceberg, would have been easier to see.
Yeah, because it would have, like you said, you would think the visibility would be better, but there's no light, and the sea is really dark, especially up in the northern seas.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's nighttime. Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't,
It's scary to think, like, I wonder, you probably couldn't even see the horizon.
No.
It probably just blended black wall eventually.
Yeah.
I don't like that. By 11 p.m., many passengers had gone to their rooms for the night. Around half an hour later, Frederick Fleet was the first to spot the iceberg. He rang the ship's bell as an alert that there was something directly in the path of the Titanic, and he called the bridge to give the warning. On the bridge, Officer Murdoch commanded that the engines of the Titanic be thrown in reverse, and ordered the ship, quote, hard a starboard, basically turn left really hard. He also closes the doors to the compartments, the watertight compartments, because remember from part 1, that can be done in the bridge. Unfortunately, putting the engines in reverse actually slowed the turning time of the Titanic.
So in a different ship, would that have been a better call?
I'm not sure, honestly.
You're not a ship expert?
I'm not. Not yet. I'm getting there, guys. I'm getting there. Titanic historian right here. I don't know if it were a smaller ship, it would have been better because it could have slowed down quicker. Like, think of an 18-wheeler versus I almost called it a beetle bug. That's what I used to call a beetle bug.
Volkswagen Beetle.
Volkswagen Beetle, yeah. One smaller, when you slam on the brakes, is going to slow down a lot faster than another one.
It's like a horse trailer versus my old Focus.
Yes.
That was a good car.
Yeah.
That car did really well in snow, and it...
She was a good one.
That Sparky was a good car.
Sparky. I didn't know his name was Sparky.
I think one of my roommates named it in Wilson.
I love it.
Sparky was a good car. I miss Sparky. Ford Focuses, let me tell you.
So at 11:40, the bow of the Titanic collided hard with the side of the iceberg. It tore a huge hole in the hull and breached 5 of the watertight compartments.
Oof.
And I'm going to go back to what we were talking about earlier of the speed of the ship having the engines thrown in reverse and slowed the turning time of the Titanic.
Good Lord.
I got a lot of tongue twisters in here today, guys. It's now believed that if the Titanic had hit the iceberg at a higher speed, even though the collision would have been harder, fewer of those compartments would have been damaged and the Titanic might have been saved.
So, it would have hit it differently?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it would have hit it a little more directly, and instead of scraping so hard along the side, which tore those compartments open, it would have, like you said, just not done as much damage, and it could have limped into port.
Done more damage to one spot instead of
multiple, which is what foundered it.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm going to put it right here, listeners, this is where the trigger warnings come into play hard. If this is not for you, please skip ahead right now. At this time, Captain Smith was actually off duty and asleep at the time of the collision. The sound of engines stopping woke him up into the nightmare that the ship was about to face. He joined First Officer Murdoch on the bridge where he received the report of what had just occurred. And from there, he told Thomas Andrews, I'm not sure if he woke up Thomas or if Thomas was already awake at the time. But either way, he told him to go down and assess the damage of the ship. The damage at this point was already done.
Oof.
Yeah. 5 of the watertight compartments had been ruptured, which was too many. At this point, the ship was absolutely in danger. Andrews predicted the ship had 1 to 2 hours left to remain afloat. In response to the news that Andrews gave him, Captain Smith ordered both Jack Phillips and the other Marconi operator, Harold Bride, to send out a distress signal around 12:15 p.m. However, this was not the SOS signal that it's often thought to be. Captain Smith actually ordered the CQD signal to be sent out. CQD stands for Come Quick Danger and had been used since 1904. However, it was thought to be confusing and a new code was introduced in 1905. The new code was now the now commonly known SOS, which stands for Save Our Souls or Save Our Ship. This distress code is actively still used today. Per Britannica, CQD was sent out versus the SOS code because even though SOS had become the standard, many ships still did use that old CQD code. And one of my sources stated that the Titanic sinking actually underlined the necessity to switch over to a new, less confusing code. Several ships did respond to the distress signal, including the RMS Olympic, but they were just too far to provide any assistance. The Titanic needed help pretty much immediately. All these ships were hours away. One ship, the Mount Temple, that was only 50 miles away, was unable to reach Titanic due to being stopped by an ice field. The Californian, that had turned their radio off around 11:35, also did not respond to Titanic's call. When Titanic sent up emergency flares as another attempt to contact any nearby ships, Californian did respond, but they didn't respond with the radio. They responded with their Norse mirror, and obviously Titanic didn't respond to that.
Why was their radio off?
This is another thing that I kind of skated over in the research. This is me pulling from what I remember from a long time ago, learning about this case. I don't have sources to back this, so please don't quote me for gospel. I believe there was a time where it was acceptable, like in this day and age, for radios to be turned off at a certain point. Like, they weren't mandated to stay on, like, 24/7.
Well, I bet this changed that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. It was like almost like an acceptable quiet time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because no boats sink after... What time is this? No boats sink after midnight.
After midnight, right. And I also have to be like, Californian, what are you doing?
Because they were really close.
I forget how close they were exactly, but they were close enough that they were signaling with a mirror. You clearly see a ship in distress. Turn your radio on.
Well, I'm like, okay.
Sorry, I'm judging a little here.
And I'm judging a little bit too for not knowing the full context.
Yeah.
But okay, here's where my thoughts going. Now, I know this is retrospect and saying, like, it's really easy to look back and go, oh, I should have done this. Or,
sure.
Because we have information now that they didn't then.
Mm-hmm.
But my brain also goes to, okay, you're signaling out earlier in the day that there is really bad ice, and you know there's other ships. Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't you have your radio on in case you got stuck?
Right.
Or in case someone else did.
Right.
But also, I don't, maybe they were like, no one's stupid enough to keep going.
Yeah. And I think we also have to think too, I believe I touched on this a little bit in the last episode. This was so common a form of transportation at this day and age. I think it's almost like you get lulled into that false sense of security.
And, like, I'm not saying the captain was stupid, but I'm just like, they're probably like, no one's going to be...
They know about the ice. They're going to be okay.
They'll be fine. No one's going to keep going.
We did our due diligence. We told them that's all we can do. Yeah.
Man, that really sucks.
It's just so... Yeah, it's a horrible situation no matter what way you spin it. And I also have another shitty little detail I found in the Encyclopedia Britannica. And this is a YouTube video that I found that the Encyclopedia Britannica put out. There was a ship seen on the horizon during all this chaos.
I did know this part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's upsetting. That's why I say it never responded to Titanic's call. This boat was thought to be the Norwegian ship Samson, which was in the area hunting seals illegally.
I feel like they probably wouldn't have gotten in as much trouble if they were saving people.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we're hunting for seals. No, we're not.
Yeah, exactly. What's bigger concern, saving literally over 2,000 people or, like, getting your wrist slapped because you were hunting illegally? It's very frustrating.
I wonder if that would have happened today, if they would have gotten in more trouble for not responding.
Maybe.
That's the whole thing of, like, not acting is the same as...
You let that happen. It's a duty of care, I guess you could call it.
Like, I would wonder if today they'd get in trouble, especially the captain, for not,
Mm-hmm. So, moving on here, at 12:20, the ship Carpathia responds to a distress signal by Harold Bride, but they're a slower ship, and they'll take at least 3 hours to reach Titanic. Despite that, they responded instantly and started heading towards the doomed vessel.
You know what? They are like the MVPs of the story.
Truly. They're amazing. Because if they hadn't responded,
Oh, but can you just imagine being the ship that comes across that?
Oh.
Like, they're the MVPs, but the amount of trauma that they must have...
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Awful. So I'm going to go backwards in time a little bit here. Again, I'm feeding out puzzle pieces to try and give an idea of the whole picture here. Around 12 a.m., lifeboats began to be prepared for launch, but there's a problem, among many. Captain Smith did not announce a general alarm to the ship, so many passengers, especially those in steerage, didn't even know anything was wrong. Passengers who were still awake just continued on as though nothing was happening. And as well, many passengers were afraid to get in the lifeboats because the Titanic had been touted as unsinkable. And again, if they thought nothing was really wrong, why are they going to leave this giant safe ship for that rickety, they weren't actually rickety, but what they probably presumed to be a rickety little lifeboat. Nevertheless, the crew began to try and evacuate its passengers, the ship's passengers. Women and children first was not actually a law, but it was considered chivalrous and essentially the right thing to do. Charles Lightoller enforced this rule hard, and this helped the people in the lower class as well as the higher class to be rescued. To add to the strangeness of this scene, among the chaos, confusion, and fear, the souls aboard the ship could hear music floating in the air. And that is because the orchestra members gathered to entertain the passengers who were waiting on board the lifeboat, or who were waiting to board the lifeboats. To keep a long story short, because we all know brevity is not my strong suit, trying to evacuate the passengers was an absolute cluster. I think this is partially to do with the lack of training, but also because everyone was just shocked and panicked. Stewards were waking up the passengers, and Thomas Andrews actually did a lot to help by searching rooms and trying to get people up, dressed, and into their life jackets. Charles Lightoller, who was in charge of launching lifeboats from the port side of the ship, which I believe is the right side, received contradictory accounts of whether he should load the boats or wait, and then whether he should lower the boats or wait, to which he had to run back and forth from to the bridge to his post to clarify, which just wasted time. At one point, Lightoller sent the crew down to try and fetch third-class passengers to get them to safety, but they just never returned.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and that further left the evacuation shorthanded. I'm not sure why they didn't return. I will be transparent about that. I don't know if it's because they couldn't find their way back, they couldn't get people up and out. At that point, I don't know how deep the ship was in the water at this point, because the ship sank really fast.
Yeah.
Really fast. So some of those water, I don't know this for certain, but like for what I know, water could have been reaching some of those cabins at this point. Finally, at 12:45 a.m., the first lifeboat was launched. And again, keep in mind, the Titanic hit the iceberg at 11:40, and Thomas Andrews gave the ship 1 to 2 hours before it sank. So we've wasted an hour here. Essentially. Like, I don't mean to say it that way, because I think
there was so much confusion that...
Yeah, but it just, again, looking back at it now, it's like, oh my god. The first lifeboat launched only carried 27 people when there was space for 65.
Was it because of all the confusion?
I think part of it, yeah, there was a lot of confusion. That lifeboat drill didn't happen when it should have, and there were questions about are the lifeboats strong enough, even though they were. It was just, there was a lot that was really, really messy. This lack of filling the lifeboats would continue as a trend while the rest of the boats were being launched. At this point, we talked about these flares earlier. Rockets were launched to try and signal the distress to anyone who may be close enough to see. We talked about this earlier. Californian cruise members did actually see the rockets, but they couldn't figure out where they were coming from.
But this was an hour later.
Yes, that's true.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I am not a ship captain, so I really can't say anything, but, like, I don't know what the standard protocol was, but you'd think that, like, along with the radio signals, you'd be, like...
What's happening?
Sending those flares up.
Right. By 2 a.m., the ship's bow was sunk so deep that the propellers had been lifted completely out of the water and were completely visible. I hate that image. That freaks me out. I don't know what it is about boat propellers, but they psych me out. And they were just out of the water. Like, Several of the collapsible lifeboats were literally washed away.
Oh, no.
Without even being launched. At this point, Captain Smith tells his crew that it's every man for himself, and he allows them to do what they need to do to save themselves. It sounds like they tried to keep it together for so long, and Captain Smith finally looked at the situation. He's like, I'm not asking you people, like, save yourselves. I'm not asking. If you can, do what you need to do. There is no helping the situation. Just get out.
Yeah. No.
Just before 2:20 a.m., the lights of the Titanic flickered and died, plunged the ship and the remaining souls into complete darkness. The bow of the ship sank so deeply into the water that it put too much strain on the back half, and the ship split completely down the middle between the back two funnels. The bow plunged through the water until it met the ocean floor. It's thought that it moved at about 30 miles an hour and took about 6 minutes to reach its final resting place.
And that is...
fast.
Well, it's way far down.
Mm-hmm. Like, that's another image that I just... ugh.
The pressure. I mean, luckily, I think the people would have died very fast.
Yeah. Like, if there was anyone that was still on the front half of that boat, they weren't. They weren't
suffering too long.
No.
Sorry if I jumped ahead on that.
No, it's okay. After the break, the stern crashed back into the water before essentially the same thing happened to it. Water flooded the front until it pulled the back half of the ship completely vertical. It bobbed like that, like a cork for a minute, before it too finally sank down into the depths, and she was gone.
How did they calculate how fast it moved?
That I do not know.
Science.
Okay. Yeah. I just want everyone to, like, reflect on that image again for a minute. Like, that's just awful to me. From here, I do want to talk about some of the passengers that I discussed in the beginning of this episode. Captain Smith went down with the ship. He was last seen on the bridge, and his body was never recovered. He left behind his wife, Sarah, and his daughter, Helen. And in 1914, Helen unveiled a statue in honor of her father. Charles Lightoller survived and was the highest-ranking officer to survive the sinking. He was the last survivor to later be pulled out of the water. So he was in that water for a long time. And I want to note here, if I remember from the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge, we've talked about it a couple times now, the water was like something like 28 degrees.
Yeah.
It was
freezing.
So if you were in that water, you were very quickly going to freeze to death. It didn't, even if you had a life jacket on and you didn't drown,
hypothermia
was going to set in very quickly. Yeah. Margaret Brown was one of the fortunate passengers to be ushered into the number 6 lifeboat. She helped to row and tried to encourage the crewmen in charge of the boat to turn around and help pick up survivors. However, this did not happen, as he was afraid they would get swamped with frantic people and that the boat would capsize.
I can understand the logic. Also, like, she is like
she's a queen.
She is.
I love her. I want to do more research into her. There is also a Molly Brown museum.
And a musical.
Oh, is there?
Isn't there the Unsinkable Molly Brown? Isn't that a musical?
I know there's a Titanic musical. If there's an Unsinkable Molly Brown musical, I'm watching it. Honestly, I'll probably watch a Titanic musical, too.
Yeah, it's a musical. 1960 musical with music and lyrics by Meredith Willson and a book by Richard Morris. The plot is a fictionalized account of the life of Margaret Brown via Wikipedia. See, we gotta get Wikipedia in there.
All right, I'm gonna try to find it. I want to watch it now. I wonder if there's a video version of it, a filmed version.
We should look it up. See,
we're gonna look it up.
For a hot minute, I thought I was making that up. I was like, I'm
I
pretty
love that.
sure there's a musical, but who knows?
She's awesome. Also, tune in. I will eventually do an episode about her. And I was saying there's a museum in Denver where
Colorado.
she lived. Yeah, about her. So if you're in Colorado, even if you're not, go to Colorado. Check out that museum. I know I went to. Thomas Anderson was another one that went down with the ship. One account says he was last seen in the first class smoking room about 10 minutes before Titanic went down. Other accounts mention him throwing things to people in the water, such as deck furniture, to try and help them float. His body was never recovered, and he left behind his wife, Helen, and his daughter, Elizabeth.
Aww.
He sounds like he was a real one.
Yeah, like trying his best, like,
yeah,
because he probably could have got like.
Mm-hmm. He's one of those that he could have probably slipped into a boat.
Yeah,
and got himself out. But even just going and like waking people up in their rooms, like he knew and he was trying to get people out of there.
Throwing people furniture instead of using it for himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Frederick Fleet, the lookout, initially survived the sinking and manned one of the lifeboats. I also want to say here, adding to my trigger warning, this is where the suicide warning comes in. After reaching land, he was often accused of not seeing the iceberg in time, and it was implied that he was partially to blame for this tragedy. And he had said through his life, like, I just wish I had those binoculars. He struggled with depression throughout his life, and sadly, he died by suicide in 1969, which...
How long after that was?
That would have been... So he was born...
Like, how long after the Titanic?
The Titanic.
1914?
1912.
1912.
So, I can't do math.
But it's several years
10.
later.
Yeah. Let's say 1910, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. He would have been in, like, his 60s or 70s, okay. I think. Which is just so freaking sad. Like, he couldn't have prevented that. I think that was just such a... I think people were really just looking for someone to blame because it was such a horrific, like... Just... I feel like it had to have felt like the Lusitania in a way. Harold Bride, one of the wireless operators, did survive. He was seen helping to try and lower one of the collapsible lifeboats when he was washed overboard with it.
Oh, shit. He, like, got in a lifeboat by accident.
Yeah, kinda. Once on the rescue ship, Harold actually helped in their wireless room, sending messages from other survivors to their loved ones. So he didn't... Again, just a hero. Like, you got dunked in the water. He had to have been freezing. He's out in that cold air for several hours until Carpathia reaches them. And then he just gets on board and is like, all right, let's keep going. I'm like,
send me to the radio room.
Oh my gosh.
Or the wireless room.
Like, insane. The other wireless operator, Jack Phillips, however, did pass away in the sinking. He stayed at his post for as long as possible, continued to send distress signals until the very last minute in an attempt to get people saved. One account I saw said that he actually made it to the lifeboat that Harold Bride was on, but then he passed away from exposure. I'm not 100% sure I understood the timeline there.
I don't know.
But either way, he did pass away, whether it was from hypothermia, not sure. The orchestra played as the ship went down, as witnessed by multiple survivors. Their last song was possibly Nearer My God to Thee, and none of them would survive.
That gives me chills.
I get a lump in my throat when I think of that, because that's just...
I have chills, and it's like roughly 90 degrees. Probably not 90 in here, but it feels like
it's hot in here. That touches something very deep in my heart, and it makes me just want to sob. Yeah. Like, it breaks my heart. That is one thing that I will give to the Titanic movie, is they showed that orchestra playing and the scene of the ship going down with them playing Near My God to Thee over it. It is a very beautifully done scene.
I got that right.
I'll give you 1 point. James Cameron. I'm so sorry. If you're listening, first of all, that's really cool. Secondly, I'm so sorry. I don't have beef with you, just your movie. I'm so sorry.
I don't have beef with you, just like your most popular accomplishment.
Hey, Avatar? Fantastic.
Space Pocahontas.
Space Pocahontas. Oh, dear.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I need to laugh.
Okay, back to the tragedy.
John Jacob Astor IV died in the sinking. He was reported to have helped his wife, who, remember, was very pregnant. Well, actually, I don't remember if I said this in the beginning.
She was 18, though.
She was 18, and she was pregnant at the time.
Oh, no.
I believe she was pretty heavily pregnant.
I mean, like, not, oh, no, that she was 18. Oh, no, that she was on a sinking ship while she was
pregnant.
While
she was pregnant, yeah. He helped her into a lifeboat, and he was pretty adamant about, like, making sure she got to safety. Mm-hmm. And supposedly he did ask if he could go with her in the boat. Charles Light Toller happened to be the one that was manning, getting people on the lifeboat at the time, told him no, and John respected it. He said okay, and he stepped away. His body was recovered with, I believe this is today's money, $2,440 in his pockets.
So they were really following that women, and like it didn't matter your status. It was the women, and
it was women and children.
And then I guess whatever crew members were manning the lifeboats, because I'm imagining the passengers probably didn't know how to do that.
Right. There was, I believe, if I remember, again, some of this was a little fuzzy. I was having a little bit hard time understanding it, but there were certain crewmen that were assigned to certain lifeboats as part of that drill.
Because they were trained on how to... Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Right.
Note to self, if I ever end up on a boat, I'm going to make sure that I'm assigned to a life.
Truly. Ida and Isidore Strauss both perished in the tragedy. Isidore tried to convince Ida to get herself to safety in a lifeboat, but she refused to enter without him. She was like, I'm not leaving you. And it's said that when the front of the boat went under, the couple were caught by a wave that swept them over. I'm not sure if they were ever recovered. Jeremiah Burke, along with his cousin, Hannah Haggerty, who I very briefly mentioned at the top of the episode, also passed away in the tragedy. This is a weird piece of history. Burke left behind a fascinating and tragic piece from the sinking. In 1913, just over a year after the tragedy, this bottle was found by a man walking his dog along a beach in Cork Harbor. Inside the bottle was a note, and it said 13/4/1912, so April 14th, 1912. And the note read, "From Titanic, goodbye all, Burke of Glanmire, Cork." After being examined by the police, the bottle was recognized by Jeremiah's grandniece, who stated he'd been given a bottle of holy water as a good luck gift before his fateful passage on the Titanic. Jeremiah's parents also recognized their child's handwriting. So that is just like, ooh. This is someone who I didn't mention in the top. Chief Engineer Joseph Bell. He and his team stayed below deck to do everything in their power to cause the ship to sink slower. Had that freezing water made contact with the boilers, a massive explosion would have occurred. Had made things probably 10 times worse.
Wouldn't it eventually have made contact with the boilers?
Yeah, I don't know if they were trying to like shut things down or what exactly they did, but they basically did what they could to help.
Basically buy time for the people to get off that.
Yes, because they were stuck down there while the boat was flooding.
Oh no.
Last person, 2-month-old Melvania Dean, her mother and her brother both survived. They ended up in lifeboat 10s, but her father was lost. And like I said, she was little tiny small at that time. So we're going to end this episode kind of abruptly, because by the time I was done researching this, I had literally gotten a lump in my throat several times. I was trying not to cry in the library.
What a good place to cry. There's worse places to cry.
Yeah, truly. After the ship sank, those who managed to get into lifeboats were afraid to return to the area in case of getting, again, swamped. Like I said about when I was talking about Margaret Brown. Eventually, they all started making their way back, but by that point, it was too late for a lot of the people that had survived the sinking. They were already gone, either through drowning or hypothermia. The ship Carpathia finally arrived at 3:30 a.m., searching for survivors. The first lifeboat finally reached them at 4:10 a.m. Of the 2,200 people aboard, Carpathia would carry only 705 survivors to safety, reaching New York on April 18th. Following the disaster, there were 2 separate inquiries from the British and American governments to try and figure out what exactly caused the tragedy. And again, I'll be honest here, I'm not going to go into heavy detail with this. Brief synopsis. Brief synopsis. The American Senate inquiry started April 19th. The British inquiry took place beginning May 2nd. The U.S. Senate inquiry essentially led to the American government shaming the British Board of Trade due to them not requiring lifeboats in quantity enough to carry all passengers to safety, as well as shaming Captain Smith for not taking enough precautions while passing through icy waters. The British inquiry resulted in new recommendations for lifeboats as well as for the watertight bulkheads to increase safety of the passengers. There's a lot of British looking at their own stuff and going, okay, well, we can do this, this, and this, and the American government just being angry. And I'm sorry if that upsets anyone the way I say that, but you know what, that's how it felt.
I guess we're kind of moving into the thoughts a little bit.
Yeah.
So I had some thoughts when you were reading that last part.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the captain was an easy target to blame because he was dead.
Yeah.
Like, I know I said that very bluntly, but it's an easy target, and I'm guessing the majority of the crew that would have been there for decision-making had also gone down with the ship.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's totally fair, though, for them to place some accountability on the British, whoever it was, who said you didn't need that many lifeboats.
Yeah.
Like, I think
that's pretty fair.
I think that's a fair thing to be held accountable for, because if I remember from the first episode, they were asking for more, and the powers that be said, no, you don't need them.
Right. Titanic still went over the amount of lifeboats required. I like you said, I do believe they had requested more, but that was shot down.
And, I think, like I said earlier, in retrospect, yes, there were a lot of things that should have been done differently, but that is also, there was no way of knowing what was going to happen. Yeah, in retrospect, there was a lot of things that was like, okay, probably shouldn't have done. And I think, once again, that's okay to be held accountable for. But I think it's very easy. Like, it was a tragedy and people are going to be angry because so many people passed away and it was preventable. But it's also easy to look at all the puzzle pieces later and go, oh, this was just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this?
But it either wasn't standard operating procedures, or they didn't know all those puzzle pieces were aligning. And also, like, the the Californian thing and the illegal seal people. Like, that was just like...
And I even think, like, the passengers that were insisting on having their messages sent to their friends and family, I'm sorry, no. Go to your rooms. It's late. Let these people do their jobs. They're there for a reason. They're not there. They're in a lot of ways, they're there to keep you safe. They're not there to be a sideshow attraction, which is, I think, how sometimes they were viewed a little bit, because it was this, like, beautiful new Marconi wireless system. But again, that's just one more puzzle piece that I do want to mention, and I didn't put it in here because I knew I was going to go down a whole rabbit hole, and I maybe will even turn this into its own episode.
Titanic Part 10.
There's just, every now and then when we're recording in our, like, catalog, they're just going to be me just, like, throwing new things in about Titanic.
We'll be halfway through an episode and go, hold on, there's a Titanic break. Oh, my God.
Oh, man. But
this is not where I saw It's great, though. It's good.
The one thing that I wanted to put in here, and I didn't, was Bruce Ismay. There's a lot about this guy, and I want to give the credit that it deserves rather than just skimming over it. Bruce Ismay, remember from the first episode, was one of the people that, like, built Titanic, kind of financed it, I guess you could say. And he got in a boat. He got himself in a boat, and a lot of people branded him a coward for that. I don't know if it was that simple. Again, I didn't put any sources into this. I was researching. I have my sources, but I didn't put them in here because I don't want to go too deep into this, because again, I think it's extremely complicated. I think it's a lot more complicated than it's made out. But this is one of those things where I think in common tellings of the Titanic, he's branded as this coward. He was too scared to go down with the ship. In the James Cameron movie, he's the guy, there's a scene where there's a guy in a fancy fur coat, and he kind of, like, slips into a lifeboat when no one is looking, and then just kind of, like, sits there all meek and quiet. And at one point, they do, like, a close-up of his face as the lifeboat is moving away from the sinking ship, and it's just very dramatic. And there's also this story that goes around that he was trying to beat a speed record. But again, some of the sources I found said there's no evidence to back that. That's hearsay. So, Bruce Ismay is a complicated character. I want to do more into him, but I'm going to leave it there for now.
Well, and, like, before we kind of move into the questions and stuff, I think it's really easy to point fingers, but at the end of the day, most people, I think, would have a very hard decision because if you can survive this, most people's survival instincts will push them to do that, even if they feel bad about it later.
Yeah. You might have survivor's guilt later, but in that moment,
you're going to want to survive.
Yeah. And I don't think it's fair to look at anyone and say, you know, how could you have not done this? How could you? And I also have to think to myself, half of those boats, those lifeboats were empty.
Yeah, no, it's
Like, if no one's going to be sitting in them anyway.
might as well.
Might as well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, and I can't imagine, like, think about this. You're on the deck of a boat. That slant was literally so sharp you could not keep your footing. People were sliding all over the place. People are screaming. There's crying. It's terrifying. At one point, all the freaking lights go out, so it's pitch black. I can't imagine the absolute overwhelm. And then trying to sit there and be brave enough to look at that and be like, okay, I just have to sit here. I'll get back to y'all. I'll get back to you, listeners. But I think it's more complex.
No, it was complex. Let's move into the question. What drew you to this topic?
General fascination and very morbid curiosity about the Titanic.
I thought you were going to name an actual general for a second there. I was like,
General Pickett. No.
That was a little bit before that.
Yes.
Was there anything you wish you could have researched more?
Oh, gosh. Again, there's just so much. Honestly, I've loved doing this. Some of the research, I will say, like trying to get a script together, I get a little frustrated and tired and headachy. But it is so interesting. I have learned so much through doing this. I'm not done yet. We'll just say that. I'm not done yet.
Every fourth episode. What did you find the most strange about this topic?
Again, there's just so much. One of the things that comes to my mind is how the ship went down. Like, it went vertical, it cracked, it went vertical. That's just such a weird image. Terrifying image. But also, and I mean this in a kind way, the way that orchestra played as that ship went down.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Oh, no. That's just such an artist thing to do. Like,
it is.
But I also think about it as, like, how bizarre to be in that complete pandemonium chaos situation and then just hear this, like, quiet music playing.
I might think I'm already dead at that point.
Yeah, it's just a bizarre, like, it's so kind of them that they did that. Like, I'm not bashing them at all. It's just, like, it's almost horror movie-esque.
It is a very horror movie thing, and, like, it probably was helpful for the people to kind of be a little bit more calm.
Oh, sure.
But, like, if I hear that, I'm like, well, I'm obviously, like, I am somewhere in the ether at this point.
Yeah, this is a weird freaking dream, and I don't like it, and I'd like to wake up now.
Very, very Twilight Zone-y.
Yes.
Well, that concludes part 2 of Christiana's deep dive into the Titanic. God, that was an unintentional pun. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. So, we would love to hear from you. If you have a suggestion for a strange or mysterious topic, a comment about an episode, or just want to chat, please reach out. You can comment directly on episodes on Spotify or YouTube, or leave a review on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For Apple, a review is for the entire podcast. For Spotify, you can do individual episodes. You can find us on Instagram at something_strangepod. You can also find us on Facebook now.
Yes.
You can send us an email at somethingstrangepod24@gmail.com. The 24 is numeric.
Well, strangers, it's time for us to part ways.
Until we meet again, never call a ship unsinkable.
We'll be back again soon with another
Something Strange.
Do you guys need a palate cleanser? We think you need a palate cleanser.
Until we meet again, never call a sink
Never call a sink unshippable.
I might put that at the end.
I'm honestly, I'm about it. Go for it.
Hold on. I need a second. Okay.
We're fanfic writers. We can make a sink shippable, don't you worry.
Oh my god.
This is a hard episode and it's 1,000 degrees in here.
I need a... Oh my gosh. I'm like... Is my mascara running?
No, you're
okay,
good.
Okay. Until we meet again, never...
I'm so sorry.
I don't get it. Hold on. I just need a...
You're good. You're good.
Oh my gosh. Never call a ship unsinkable.
We'll be back again soon with another.
Hold on.
I love it. I love it.
right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Something strange.